Thank you for staying with us. Time now for the news review right here, and we'll be joining the conversation, Suleiman Ibrahima, Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa. He is our guest, and he is already on, as always, very punctual. Good morning, Mr. Ibrahima. How are you this Monday morning, and how are you feeling at the start of the week?
Good morning, Ben. Thank you for having me. Well, it appears as though it will be a good week, and we look forward to having a productive week.
It appears it's going to be a good week. It's been pretty wet these last few days. In fact, I was drenched in rainwater on Saturday when I went jogging. It really, I was soaked in rain. But how's the previous week been for you as we usher in a new one?
Well, it was quite productive. Series of meetings here and there, reflections, of course, about what is happening in our country and its implications for what we do. Because certainly the economic crisis and all that we're going through has implications on the environment that we work in, on press freedom, on media sustainability, and all those things. So last week was mainly a lot of reflections with a team on going forward and exploring what the situation is in the other countries that we work in. So it was a lot more of reflections and getting things going.
Let's take a quick swipe at a developing matter which we are looking at today as one of our big stories, on which you shared your thoughts a few days ago, the Oyiripa FM situation. We've heard some legal luminaries, among others, say, look, the chiefs are representative of something. We've heard the likes of Professor Ransford Jampo say, look, there are some instances where our legal system hasn't penetrated yet. And when there are issues, it is the chiefs who stand in and do the right thing. He cites in his latest piece, for example, that, look, in 2008, it took the intervention of some chiefs in the country to forestall political disaster. They talk about the role chiefs play, but then there's also the bit about chiefs, wandering into galamsey, chiefs engaging in politics, which they shouldn't per the 1992 Constitution, and of course, maybe taking upon themselves powers that they are not clothed with. We have the Oyiripa FM situation. We've heard from the GJA, we've heard from the NMC, among others. Looking at the dynamics, some also say, like Professor Jampo, that, look, why did you even comply? You should have just respectfully ignored, like Prof says, what they said and go ahead. But by capitulating, you have showed yourself unfit to be part of the fourth estate. How do you digest all of these, discussions?
Well, for the station to have said we are not going to comply would be an act of foolhardiness. It is certainly impossible to say that you're going to resist a fiat from Menchia in Kumasi. And of course, that wouldn't even be in the interest of all of us when institutions begin to disregard and disrespect the authority of traditional leaders. As I said last week, sometimes even if the elderly go wrong, there's a way of dealing with it. And that way does not include defying and bringing the institution into disrepute. And as I said, even in terms of physically, there's no way a station can say, Menchia says you must shut down in Kumasi, and we're going to defy it, unless, of course, you are prepared for the consequences, which would include anything from physical violence to, damage of equipment and a lot more that could happen. So it was absolutely not going to be possible for the radio station to have said, look, Menchia has expressed his view, and we're going to do what we like. I share the opinion, and I made it quite clear from last week that I didn't think that what the traditional authorities in Kumasi did was right in terms of shutting down a radio station legally. They are not clothed with the powers to do that. But subsequently, I've listened to what Odike is supposed to have said on Oyiripa FM, and I kept asking myself, indeed, what was really wrong? This is a citizen of the area. This is somebody who clearly shows some reverence to traditional authorities and believes that if Nananom were to act, the illegal mining activities that were destroying the water bodies, the environment, and so on in that area would not be happening because Nananom are powerful. And he cites the example of the late Ofinsohene, that when he said there was not going to be galamsey in his area, there was no galamsey happening. So it was, for me, in one way, a testimony to the powers that our chiefs willed, and a confession to say, or sort of a testimony to say, if our chiefs want this thing to stop, it will stop because they are powerful. But to the extent that these things are happening, and then chiefs are now, blaming politicians for these activities, is an act of they not perhaps assuming their responsibility and all of that. Yes, he said it in a tone that may be said to be disrespectful, a tone that may be said to be demeaning of the authorities of Menchia, and also, of course...
Do you agree with those who run that commentary that he was disrespectful? Do you agree?
Well, to the extent that we hold our chiefs in a certain, position, or, for example, I keep saying, even if there's a matter that I feel my father is going wrong or hasn't done the right thing, I may express it in a certain way. But if I use a certain tone, in the end, I could be said to have been disrespectful to my father or to an elderly person that I may be engaging with. So I believe he said the right things. There was absolutely nothing wrong with what he said. But of course, if you listen to him, and it's understandable because what is happening to the environment is quite devastating. So it's understandable that someone like him would speak with the kind of emotion that he expressed himself. And to that extent, yes, people may say, oh, you shouldn't have, expressed yourself the way you did. You could have used the same words, but in a tone that was somber, and then people wouldn't have said, look, or the chiefs wouldn't have been as angry as they are. But I think that indeed, as far as the issues he raised are concerned, Nananom really have to sit up. Otherwise, we cannot but say that they are complicit in what is happening.
Finally, Suleimana, another very topical issue. Mr. President has been speaking in recent times and addressing the Yagbonwura and others, and you could enlarge that to say the people of Ghana. He speaks about how the people in that community have voted time without number for the opposition NDC, about 8 terms running. And then he looks at their roads and others and says, I'm here and now you come to me, the people of Yendi, telling me about this and that and that. You're lucky to have me as your president. If not, well, who knows? Some people have taken that into different realms and say, wait a minute, Mr. President, we're lucky to have you as president with all that is going on. But some also insist that, look, he is doing the right things. What do you make of that? Was it wrong for the president to have said, you're lucky to have me as president?
I think it was an unnecessary comment to have said that. I believe that the president should also count himself lucky for being a leader over the Ghanaian people. It is the Ghanaian people who gave him that opportunity. He did not go and buy that title from London and then come and impose it on us. It is we, the Ghanaian people, who decided to give him that opportunity to be the leader of our country, which then enables him to fly in luxurious private jets that you and I cannot afford to fly in, which allows him to have all the security detail and all the protocol around him. So I think that it was not the right comment to make. Beyond that, also, to suggest that because a particular group of people have been voting for a particular political party over the period, for them to be complaining about this development or that development, it's quite something that is curious, as if to suggest that the people who have been voting for his party over the period have had all their issues resolved. Ashanti region has consistently been voting for the NPP. What is happening in Ashanti region? We know about MPs who are being chased away by their constituents, including the majority leader in parliament, who has since been in parliament. I mean, he's been in parliament for maybe close to 3 decades now. And it's been on the ticket of the NPP. And yet we have people, and this is Kumasi, metropolitan. Swami is part of Kumasi metropolitan area. And yet his constituents were chasing him away for lack of development. We saw the recent one last week where constituents were chasing their MP with cutlasses. I grew up in the Ashanti region, and I know quite a number of places within the region. I don't think that the region has all that it needs. In the eastern region, well, people talk about Chibi and how the town has been given a complete facelift under President Akufo-Addo. But, I mean, that's Chibi. There are other places in the eastern region. Are we saying that the roads have all been done, the schools have all been built, all communities have electricity and all of that? The answer is no. I don't think that any part in Ghana has had the full complement of development. And even in the West, where we say they are developed, I'm sure there are still issues that they are dealing with. So to have suggested that, well, it is because, or it is quite surprising that you've been voting for one party that has been in power for a certain period of time and still you lack certain developments, I think it's really an untenable comment, because as I've said, there have been parties or areas where the NPP has been voted for consistently, and yet there are still a lot of development challenges in those areas. So I don't know the basis on which he said what he said.
Let's get into the papers. Daily Graphic, we'll start from there. Overaged aircraft face ban, measures to ensure crew passenger safety. I'll bring you some details of that. I'm cooperating with OSP investigations. Colonel Damwa says so after having said that this is all a witch hunt and all of that. Cashew still among top 10 non-export traditional earners. Story on page 53. On the back page, Algeria 2023 Chan qualifier. Bania Suraj win day for Galaxies. I'll bring you some snippets of that when I'm wrapping with the paper. But let's look at this one on page 16. I will start with the one on page 3. So starting from the front page, overaged aircraft face ban, measure to ensure crew passenger safety. And the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority is to ban aircraft that are above 20 years from using the country's airspace. The measure is meant to, among other things, ensure the safety of passengers and crew, as well as their comfort while en route to and from Ghana. Consequently, the GCAA will soon issue a new directive to stop airlines from importing or flying commercial aircraft that are 20 years and above in the country. When the directive is issued, Ghana will join a growing list of countries such as Nigeria, Uganda, Thailand, Bolivia, Malaysia, Mongolia, and Turkey that have imposed age ceilings for commercial aircraft. Why I find this interesting, Suleimana, is recently I had to read a lot on the back of what Ibrahim Mahama, not the brother of the former president, but the artist, was doing, bringing in aeroplanes, aircraft, and using them as libraries and all of that. Beautiful gesture. But I also found out that depending on what model of plane and depending on what the structure is, how big and other factors, it could go even 30 years and it would still be roadworthy or flight worthy, so to speak. And sometimes even when they are done, they are then cannibalized. Their parts are used for other aircraft because this equipment tends to be pretty expensive. So there are pros and cons of this, but we also admit that just like we say with our vehicles on the roads, when these aircraft reach their lifelines, we must not be bringing them into the country. Your quick take.
Well, it's a very, very commendable action being taken by the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority, a precautionary measure, which is really commendable. Our airspace has been accident-free for, God knows how long, which is really, really commendable. But the reality is that if you fly some of these international airlines that come into Ghana, I've had the occasion of flying in British Airways to London a number of times, Delta Airlines to New York a number of times, and the United Airlines have flown it also to the US a couple of times, and I've done the others, Brussels and so on. And quite clearly, you could see that the planes that are deployed on our routes are obviously old planes. You know, when you sit in an old aircraft, no one tells you that this is an old aircraft. Everything shows that it's an old aircraft. And yet, I mean, if you're going to the US and you decide to go through London, from London to New York, you would see that you are in an aircraft that is really, really or fairly new. So you ask yourself, why is it that consistently we are having, you know, aircrafts that are quite old, even if they are airworthy? There are certain services that it's either your seat is not reclining well and you have to manage within the 6 hours or 11 hours, depending on where you are coming from. And it really doesn't help. In our country, Ben, it's literally the same. People will tell you that if you are going to, let's say, Bolgatanga or any of those parts of the country and you decide to go by STC, for example, quite often they deploy the old buses there. Even though you expect that because of the distance, well, they should have some of the, you know, flashiest and newest buses going there. You would have sometimes the oldest buses deploying. So it's as if, well, they look at how wealthy the people at the destination are, and then decide which type of airline or which type of flight or plane.
So there's discrimination.
So I think it's a very, very positive step that the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority is taking. I remember there was a time BA was warned about the kind of, you know, aircraft they use for this route, the Accra-London route. Last week or so, I read about, is it Delta Airline having a particular plane that is deployed on the New York-Accra route also being banned by the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority. So kudos to them. I think they are doing a great job. And we look forward to seeing that their measures are taking shape.
Let's look at some other stories very quickly. I'm cooperating with OSP Investigations, Colonel Damwase, story on page 16, and then I'll bring in the one with Cashew and the sporting story as well, so we can wrap with the paper. So let's quickly get there. Page 16 of the paper. The Commissioner of the Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority, that's the GRA, Colonel Kwejo Damwa, retired, has said he is fully cooperating with the Office of the Special Prosecutor in investigations into some aspects of the operations of the division. He also says, the Special Prosecutor has the right to investigate, but I am confident that at the end of the day, the truth will stand and my integrity will remain intact. I have not contravened any laws of the land and therefore I have nothing to fear, he posited. But while he says this, he's also gone after the Special Prosecutor and his work, in some ways referencing it as a witch hunt and something personal rather than something that is of public interest. How do you react to that? I mentioned some time back that Martin Amidu had said, look, the Special Prosecutor is on a wild goose chase. This isn't something he should follow. But I've heard the likes of, I think, Kofi Bentel and others say, no, the Special Prosecutor is on the right trajectory and Martin Amidu should shove off and let him do his work. What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, I think Colonel Damwa is speaking too much, and that is quite curious. If an institution that you heard is being investigated and you know you have not done anything wrong, allow the investigations to go on. At the end of the day, if there is nothing implicating you, you would be vindicated. But since the La Bianca issue, he comes out talking, describing the Special Prosecutor as a small boy, and all manner of comments. And for me, that is quite curious. If there is nothing wrong, if you've not committed any wrongdoing, then what the Special Prosecutor is doing perhaps is to help you. Because if there are other subordinates or other people in the institution who may have done something wrong, and at the end of the day, they are exposed, that's something that should help you. But the way he's commenting and talking is really, really quite curious. And it makes one wonders What is it that he knows that we don't know? Because if there's nothing to hide, why should you be bothered talking that much as he is doing? So for me, the special prosecutor has started off well, and we all should give him the support that is needed, even if at the end of the day it turns out to be what Martin Amidu said. So what? I mean, it's important that matters that are curious are brought up. We all know that there is a lot that happens at the ports. You know, that one is something that cannot be disputed. And it has not been just now. Under President Mills, if you remember, Anas did some work at the ports.
Yes.
Under President Mahama, there were issues at the ports in terms of this whole issue about auctioning of people's items. It's been a major scandalous thing since, you know, President Kufuor's era. In terms of auction cars and who get to buy them and so on, it's always been an issue. So certainly there is a problem with our ports. And of course, with the customs division of our GRE and how they go about doing their work. So let's allow the special prosecutor to do his work. Let us give him the support that he deserves. But the way Kenneth Damwa is speaking is really, really quite curious. When people begin to act this way, it even adds to the suspicion. What is it that he wants to hide? You know, if there's nothing to hide, let's wait for the special prosecutor to do his work. Comply. Why do you need to tell us that you would comply? You don't need to tell us that you comply. Of course, you have an option. You don't have an option to comply or otherwise. So why tell us that you would comply? I think he's just speaking too much.
He is speaking too much. Page 53 now, very quickly to that one. Here we go. So let me just check. Yes, it's supposed to be on page 53, but where is it on page 53? That's the issue. It has to do with the cashew bit, not to be found on page 53. Let me bring you the story on the back page of the paper, and then maybe later I'll find that one. I'll fish it out. Daniel Afriyie Barnier and Seydou Suraj emerged heroes at the Cape Coast Stadium yesterday when their goals gave the Black Galaxies, the local Black Stars of Ghana, a head start in the first leg of the Championship for African Nations qualify against the Chan Eagles of Nigeria. Barnier expertly converted a penalty in the 46th minute to break the deadlock in the tension-packed match, while Suraj's 85th minute tap-in was enough to electrify the stadium with spontaneous drumming, singing, and dancing. And so they've kick-started this on a very good note. But let's look at the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Don't tax offering, tithe in churches. Reverend Frimpong Manso, Reverend Professor Paul Frimpong Manso says so. Hackman Owusu-Agyemang loses wife. Our condolences to him. And then KNUST students face dismissal if, that's according to the governing council, and 2 die in Gorée crash. Let's take a quick look at the stories on pages 10 and 17. So, the president of the Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Council, Reverend Paul Frimpong Manso, has said he does not support the call for government to tax offering and tithe collected by the various Christian bodies. Rather, he said government should strengthen the GRA to identify churches that operate businesses on the side and tax them to increase the country's revenue mobilization for national development. Then tie that into the story on page 17. Any student who participates in the organization of what is described as morale and or procession will be dismissed, the Governing Council of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology has stated. Additionally, with effect from the 2023-2024 academic year, the junior common room system of hall management by students has also been abolished. 2 stories, one bordering on education, the other one bordering on taxation and our churches. Quick reflections, Sule.
Well, I think that the issue about not taxing tithes is in order. I mean, it's a religious thing, and yes, we are struggling to raise revenues, but I don't think that will be the way to go. I fully endorse the proposal that, if anything at all, businesses that are being operated by churches and making profits are the ones that should be taxed, instead of maybe seeing them as part of the churches and the money they make as part of whatever church monies that ought not to be taxed. And to that extent, I fully endorse the view that has been expressed by the head of the charismatic churches. So yeah, that would be my view on that one.
Okay. How about the one to do with, let me just get that story. So the one to do with the KNUST students, JCR out of the picture and all that. How do you respond? Right thing to do and no morale, no charging, no processions.
Certainly, that's not the way to go. I don't think that our university authorities should begin to adopt measures that are intended to bring up timid students. Leadership is important, and one way by which students can, learn the phenomenon of leadership is their participation in the management of halls. I was a member of the JCR of the Kwafu Hall, and I was a member um, of the General Assembly at the university at our time, and I remember at our time, people like Samia Wuku, Okujeto Ablakwa, Justice Rimsai, Adueshia, a lot of the friends who are in politics today, we all started when we were at the General Assembly. Of course, some of us decided to go into other areas, and it's not surprising to find former friends and colleagues, or still friends and colleagues like Samia Uku, Okujeto Ablakwa, and all the colleagues who ended up in politics, doing the politics. Of course, there are sometimes issues with our politics today, and anytime I talk to these friends, I express those concerns. But that's where it all starts from. So to say that JCRs shouldn't be part of hall management, I think that is really untenable. Because students, how do you say students at the university level cannot be part of managing the affairs of the hall? I mean, JCRs are so critical in the management of halls. We should look at the root cause of the issues. I don't think that the problem is their participation in JCR, in JCR activities. I don't think it is the question of whether they get to be involved in what is called morale sessions or not. It is the whole issue of the moral decadence in our society. That is what we have to look at. The fact that we have a constitution that envisaged that for these reasons, let us have a national commission for civic education. And from one government to the other, that organization has been made dormant. The organization that is supposed to inculcate the right values and ethical things in our citizenry is not being funded. It is being funded to a large extent by foreigners. So to some extent, we are saying that, look, people from the West should be concerned about how Ghanaians imbibe the right attitudes and morals than our own government. If there is one particular institution that has to be funded properly in this country, it is the NCCE. That is not done. And look at what our leaders are doing. If you exhibit these kinds of conduct as the president, allowing anything to go, and as somebody said, making corruption attractive, at a time when people are suffering, students are lying, kids are lying on their bellies to write, a problem that can be resolved with just about maybe 1 million Ghana cedis. That is not happening, and we are interested in having our V8s, flying in luxurious private jets, chartering private jets for a single MP to come down and vote, and so on and so forth. That's the kind of country we are building. Okay. And for me, that is the source. If we don't deal with the root cause of the problem, look, it doesn't matter whether you say they should be part of JCR management of halls. It doesn't matter whether you say there shouldn't even be SRCs in our universities. It doesn't matter if you say there shouldn't be morale sessions. There will still be problems on our campuses. What is important is to deal with the moral issues that we are facing.
Let's wrap with just a few stories from three papers, but some of them already mentioned, so I'll just rehash them. Ghana is lucky to have me, according to President Akufo-Addo. There's also Ransford Jampo. Chiefs do not have the power to order shutdown of radio stations. We've already looked at these. But Ato Forson nails Chief of Staff, and he alleges, he spoke on Joy FM, alleging that the Chief of Staff received a whopping 240 million Ghana cedis, of which 90% was used to purchase vehicles. That is what Dr. Cassiel Ato Forson says. But quick stories from the Daily Guide newspaper and the Finder newspaper. Government has achieved a lot despite odds. That's according to Vice President Bawumia. Will help Ghana stabilize economy. That's according to the IMF chief. And Ghana gets Genius app or Genial app for SIM card registration. There is also EcoBank Ghana gets high GCR ratings with positive outlook. As some people may have seen the latest Fitch ratings and may have contemplated a few things. But bottom line, when your country is downgraded, all the banks will also be downgraded. And so Fitch downgraded Ghana, so the banks were also downgraded. It had nothing to do with their individual performance. That's the bottom line. But the GCR ratings are more reflective of the broader picture, where EcoBank and others actually, some of them get A scores. So we must contemplate that. But quick reflections on these stories, and it's a wrap.
Well, the Vice President talking about what has been achieved. I don't know if there's any government that hasn't achieved anything in our history. Every government comes in and does what has to be done. But certainly, as far as this government is concerned, I don't think what has been achieved is commensurate with the borrowing that has happened and the levels of debt that this country has been plunged into. And those are the matters that we should be dealing with. I'm quite interested in the story about the allocation to the Chief of Staff's office and how that money was spent, because the claim is that a considerable amount from that money, or a considerable part of that amount, was used in purchasing vehicles.
So 90%, allegedly, 90% of the 240 million.
Yes, I think it's important that independent journalists go into this story and bring out the story so that we can really verify what the MP has said. Sometimes some of these stories, important as they are, depending on where they come from, we end up politicizing them, and in the end, it just gets away from the public radar like that. But some of these stories are really, really important, and I would encourage independendent journalists to go into the matter to bring a comprehensive story that would educate all of us. And I'll be mentioning this to my colleagues at the Fourth Estate, because it's a story that is of significant interest and has a lot of implications for our country. So, it's not just this story. There have been quite a number that come up. And then once it comes up from either an NDC MP or MPP MP, it just becomes a matter of a partisan debate. And then within a matter of a day or two, it's gone. And sometimes the implications are quite important, to the extent that we need to always interrogate them properly and independently.
So let it not just be political fodder, but let's investigate it to its logical conclusion and see what emanates from there. But thank you so much, Suleimana, for animating our Monday morning, joining us for the news review. And we wish you a splendid week.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great week as well.
All right. Suleimana Brahima, the affable fellow, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. He joined us for the news review. But up next, we're serving you the sports. Of course, definitely we'll bring you some scoop in terms of Black Galaxies trouncing the Chan Eagles of Nigeria by 2-0. Expect more coming your way in sports. Stay.